Welcome to Convergence.fm. I'm your host, Ashok Shivanand. On the show, we explore how purpose-driven leaders align their culture, operations, and experimentation to de-risk the decisions that really matter and lead AI-enabled businesses with clarity. Convergence.fm. Transform from the inside out. Hey folks, welcome back to Convergence.fm. On today's episode, we're going to talk about Microsoft Copilot. We have done a number of workshops recently or engagements with mid-market CEOs and their leadership teams who are using Microsoft Copilot. And I'll be honest with you, it's not by any means anywhere near our first choice of tool. But the fact is, a lot of you are using it today. You've already got your subscriptions, and you're maybe feeling a little stuck in it. So rather than just complaining about it, we're going to share what we've seen that actually works, what doesn't work, and what options you have. And this is from real-world engagements we've done just in the last couple of weeks. Here's what we're going to cover. Firstly, why Copilot can actually give your team the wrong impression around the opportunity with AI, and why that should be a major concern for you as a leader. Secondly, we're going to talk about a leadership problem that we keep hearing from CEOs we talk to around delegating your entire AI strategy to the CIO and this Copilot rollout. Number three, we're going to talk about 3 real stories. There's a sales VP onboarding plan. There's a government consulting workflow that saved the company many millions of dollars, and a prompting coaching workshop that we did that changed how a leadership team thinks about AI. Number 4, we're going to talk about practical tips that you can use right now to get more out of even your Copilot instance, despite how frustrating it can be. And number 5, we're going to talk about when to move beyond Copilot entirely. Let's get into it. Subscribe to the podcast to get future episodes as soon as they're published. If you find this helpful, give the podcast a 5-star rating on your podcast app or hit that like button on YouTube. Let me start by giving Copilot some credit, because you could argue that Microsoft does deserve some. And that's because of the massive market share that they have. And that's really the one thing I think that Copilot has going for it that all the other AI tools don't. If you're a Microsoft shop running Microsoft Office, Copilot has access to your emails, your shared files, your calendar, your Teams, and everything else in that Microsoft 365 environment. And you've already likely got enterprise-level agreements in place with them. So you've already discussed security, how they use your data, privacy, and the other aspects around playing defense here. And that, no doubt, matters some, especially for mid-market companies that don't have the luxury of building custom infrastructure from scratch. So I'm not here to tell you to rip Copilot out. I'm here to share some stories about how you might use it better and also how to be aware of where Copilot really falls short. Now, here's where I have to be straight with you. Copilot is not by any means reflective of the capabilities of generative AI today or large language models and the agents around it. It's just not. And here's my fear, is that if Copilot is the only tool that your team is using from an AI perspective, a lot of your people are going to become even more skeptical around AI in general, and that's making your adoption way harder. Not because AI isn't useful, but because their experience with Copilot, especially at your office, has been frustrating. And we've seen this firsthand. We've worked with a number of companies in just the last few weeks where we showed their teams what more advanced models from Anthropic's Claude or Google's Gemini or OpenAI's ChatGPT can actually do. And we watched people's eyes open. They went from still thinking AI was overhyped to starting to see areas in their business where it could help them with improving predictability, efficiency, and maybe even generating a lot more revenue. Now, does this mean that you're spending more on subscriptions? Yes. It might mean ponying up more for access to Claude for your team, but it's less than $100 a month per employee. And I personally think that it's more like you can't afford not to, as opposed to wondering how you afford it. And I'm happy to chat more with you about that. Relying just on Copilot, in my opinion, is leaving way too much on the table. And here's some things that we noticed. Funnily, employees weren't afraid of AI replacing their jobs when they used Copilot. They didn't see at all how that might happen with such an frustrating tool. They were more irritated that their managers or their CEOs were nudging them to use something so frustrating, especially when the CEOs themselves weren't using it. That's a problem in your culture, I think. And if the tool that you're pushing is creating friction instead of enthusiasm and creativity, that's setting your AI adoption back. And I think that's going to have long-term ramifications for your business. Another thing is that Copilot is likely managed by your in-house IT team, or maybe you use a managed services provider. And that means that the chances of disruption as well as confusion is a lot higher compared to, say, Claude or OpenAI when they have maintenance teams in Silicon Valley working like consumer-based software should. And what we've seen is that teams, in some cases, had actually developed workflows in Copilot, despite how frustrating it is, only to show up one morning to find that they no longer had access or it didn't quite work the same way because IT changed something. That's going to kill your momentum. And so are when your different teams have different access to different Copilot features. Or maybe the Copilot instance itself has access to different files and directories. And so while this is useful from a governance standpoint, I think it's very important to spend some time being intentional and thinking about your employees' perspective from them. If there's one department that can do something and another can't, and no one knows why, people kind of end up throwing their hands up and going back to doing their jobs and getting their deadlines and everything else met versus trying something new. Now, here's something that really bothers me that came up. When we asked CEOs to articulate their AI transformation strategy, many of them wrote down that their CIO is rolling out Copilot, and that is their AI strategy. Now, that's not a strategy, let alone the fact that I don't think the CIO should be held accountable for this or be the first in charge. These are CEOs, mind you, that are running like businesses over 300 employees. They're very sharp in many respects, but I don't think they're yet seeing the full picture of what AI can do for them. So I'm so glad that they reached out and asked for help. As a leader, you need to be using AI daily. You need to use it to help you make decisions, identify the biggest choke points, constraints, and problems in your business, understanding what options you have to solve these, and then prioritizing your team's actual strategy with the help of AI. This needs to roll down to your immediate leadership team where you're sharing AI wins multiple times a week. And then you're also wanting to plan for training and onboarding and enablement for your entire workforce. Now, bear in mind, like any transformation before this one, you're seeking to change your organization, and you have to do that by changing every single individual inside it. And like every other adoption curve before it, boiling the ocean and trying to get everyone to do everything at the same time can be frustrating. So I want you to really think about where you start that. The second one is that if the CEOs that we're talking to are exposed only to Microsoft Copilot from an AI standpoint, the quality of their decisions is going to be diluted, and so are what they expect and can see opportunities from AI. So I think this is going to reinforce the idea that AI isn't ready for you when in reality it surely is, and your competitors are likely using it a lot better than what you might be. That all being said, here are some things that we learned from the work that we did recently around Copilot. Because Copilot does have deep access to your files, your Microsoft environment, there are some smart ways to take advantage of it right away, even though they may have some nuances and quirks around it. So I want to share 3 stories from CEOs we worked with recently. The first one was around a medical device company who was onboarding a new VP of sales. The CEO here that we were working with had previously been the head of sales themselves. So there was a lot of institutional knowledge, the relationships, the cadence, the deals in motion. And it was sitting in their head, but also in their inbox, their calendar, and their files. So we had them write down manually before AI some of the key things that they'd want to think about for onboarding their VP of sales. And then we used Copilot to analyze the CEO's calendar, their shared drives, their emails, and it pulled together key information, relationships, and context that it thought would be useful for this VP of sales that would be coming in. We then sequenced this into a 6-month onboarding plan in a way that would feel energized for this VP coming in. And side note, we use a psychometric analysis tool called Acumax Index to understand how the VP likes to be engaged and motivated. And we were able to fold that into the plan for the onboarding, and the AI was able to take the output from Acumax really well as we thought about it. Now, here's something key here. We used more than one AI tool. We used Copilot to extract and analyze the data within the Microsoft environment because that's what it's good at, that's what it had access to. But then once we had a summary of all the stuff that we'd have to think about, we moved that data over to Claude to build the actual onboarding plan because we liked the Claude synthesis a lot better. It was a lot better at strategy and writing. And so we used each tool for its strengths versus trying to do everything in Copilot. And that's a pattern that I'd like all of you to think about. Side note, Claude does have a system now that you can provide it access to your Microsoft environment. So that might be something you want to think about. The second story is the CEO of a government consulting firm that provides really niche services to various municipalities. And he has a team of really high-paid consultants, folks who are getting paid at least $150K. And they were spending a huge amount of time pulling together and assembling these documents for their clients. And when we were talking about the constraints of their business, this seemed to be something that a lot of their high-paid consultants were spending a lot of their time on. So what we did was we tried to see what Copilot would be able to do. And after wrangling it with a bit and having to go through some extra steps to make sure that his Copilot instance had access to the right shared drives, we were able to create a synthesis of these documents and a template generator that handled about 60 to 70% of the document assembly work. That's huge when you think about the savings for these high-paid consultants and how big of a staff he had. And so with this one, we did a lot of the work inside Copilot because this CEO just wanted proof of whether this could be helpful or not. And we were able to quickly convince ourselves and him that the efficiency that was feasible within this workflow for his expensive consultants could add directly to the bottom line and fairly quickly. So we used Copilot for this experiment and then validated that this idea had legs. And then we've moved into an engagement with him where we're building a custom agent for him that is outside of Copilot using tools that are more relevant and suitable for it, and creating a more seamless user experience for his clients. So it was a great experimentation tool. They also really appreciated here the intern analogy. They hire interns themselves that work with these consultants, and we taught them to think about AI as an eager intern that can do the grunt work, but the consultants still have to do the stuff they're good at, which is forming opinions, making decisions specific to that client's circumstance, and then making sure to double check this AI intern's work before anything gets sent out to any of the clients. So depending on how sensitive the data is, that review step is non-negotiable. Your clients are paying your team to ensure quality, not blindly trusting AI. And there's a lot of examples internationally of Big Four consulting firms getting into trouble because there's AI hallucinations that landed in final reports that they submitted. And the third story that we experienced recently was a leadership team that was already bought in. The CEO was trying to use it. The leadership team was trying to use it. And they thought they maybe needed some additional coaching from us in terms of how to prompt. So this leadership team brought us in to coach us on prompting. They had Copilot deployed across their organizations, but were, as you can imagine, pretty frustrated, not getting much out of it. But at the same time, we're pretty worried about not adopting AI fast enough. So what we found was a few practical habits that made a huge difference. And we've created a way for them to reinforce these habits too. The first is to ask Copilot to cite its sources. And if it's pulling data from your internal shared drive, you want to know where and links to which files. Secondly, cross-verifying anything important from the Copilot output with your internal knowledge bases and training materials so that Copilot has something to reference and check against before producing you as an output. Thirdly, we asked it to highlight what it thinks requires human review. And we could do this in a variety of ways. And this gets AI to self-flag areas of uncertainty, which helps your team with focusing their attention on what it's double checking. Another thing, since we had the IT person in, is we started to log the Copilot queries from their team. And this allowed us to create a list of areas where folks were maybe getting stuck with Copilot. And this data was really helpful because I think when we go back, we're going to have a list of areas that we can reduce friction in their company, whether it's within the AI instance or outside of it. And number 5 over here, we also showed them what Copilot is useful for and when to move off of Copilot. Some tasks are just better suited for Claude or Gemini or OpenAI, and we taught them about the different models. And then ultimately, we also showed them how to use Claude to write better Copilot prompts, since Claude's just way more user intuitive. And so help them kind of choose what tools for the job. So in summary, here are some takeaways that I want you to think about for this episode. The first one is that Copilot has real advantages since it lives inside your company's Microsoft environment and it has access to your data, and you've already got enterprise agreements already worked through from a legal standpoint with the vendor. So don't ignore these strengths despite how frustrating the tool can be. That being said, number 2, Copilot is not representative of what AI can actually do today. If it's the only tool that your team is using, I think you're severely limiting your team's potential and probably making them more skeptical of AI or frustrating them with it versus instilling clarity, confidence, and hopefully creativity for them about how they can use it to improve your business, improve their day-to-day. Number 3, do not delegate your AI strategy to a Copilot rollout. You need to be using AI daily yourself. You need leadership teams to be using it and talking about their wins. And then you ultimately need to be thinking about how you're training your entire workforce to use AI and find use cases within their work that AI can help them. Number 4, use Copilot for what it's good for, accessing your internal data. And then think about moving to better models like Claude or Gemini or OpenAI for synthesis, strategy, and building this into real workflows. It's also really helpful to test and validate things so that you can build custom software later. Number 5, treat it like a sharp intern that's very eager. Let them do the grunt work, but always have your experts, the humans that you trust, review, refine, and make the final call before it goes out of the building. If any of this resonated with you, if you're stuck in a Copilot environment and you want help in getting unblocked, whether that's figuring out what's possible, building something custom like that document tool, or just getting your team up to speed with the training program, we would love to chat. You can start with just a 30 to 60 minute office hours. Email us at officehours@convergence.fm, and someone from our team will get a hold of you to schedule some time. I join a lot of those sessions myself. We've helped CEOs just like you work through these exact challenges, and we'd be happy to do the same for you. The office hours are free for podcast listeners, so there's no upfront costs at all for you to get started. And we facilitate these so they're not a sales pitch. There's truly a working session where we aim for clarity and confidence so you can ultimately be more creative with harnessing technology to grow your business with purpose and intent. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Convergence.fm. We will be back next week with another one. We'll see you then. Thank you for joining me on the Convergence Podcast today. Subscribe to the Convergence Podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your content. If you're listening and found this helpful, please give us a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button and tell me what you think about what you heard today.